Welcome to this episode of Criminology Chats. I'm your host, JR, and with me today, as she has been for other episodes, is Chicago school student Carly Foster, who is majoring in criminology. Welcome, Carly.
Thank you, JR, for having me on the podcast. I look forward to it. Today, JR and I will chat with Brandon Hall. Brandon is a native of Nashville, Tennessee. For about 25 years, he has been an emergency 911 dispatcher with the Metro Nashville Department of Emergency Communications. He has been the calm voice at the end of 911 calls for hundreds of thousands of incidents, including nationally recognized events such as the Nashville Christmas Day bombing, the 2010 flood, and numerous active shooters.
Brandon Hall. I've been a dispatcher in Nashville, Tennessee, 911 dispatcher in Nashville, Tennessee for the past little bit over 25 years. And from that, I started a true crime show called Music City 911. There I play actual real 911 calls, police camera audio, things like that, and talk about all the crimes involved. And most of the time it's just me on the show. On occasion, I might have a guest, but mostly it's just me that does the show. And when I say does the show, I do everything with the show, as you probably do as well.
Yes, I do. Got lucky. I have one person, Brandon, that helps me. It's actually a professional producer out of New York, and she's really great. And I appreciate her a whole lot, Tell us why you decided, I think it was in 2019, you started your podcast?
Yeah, really late 2019. It was, I want to say probably midway through December. And me and a buddy of mine, we actually had the show started together. I had a co-host, and at the time I'd been there for about 20-ish years. And he had been there. He had just retired from there a few months earlier after working there for 40 years. And, we had, I think, 6 or 7 episodes together. And after a while, after he started seeing, he actually had kind of a radio background as well. And once he saw that it's not necessarily coming in to a radio station talking about what you want to talk to and then going home, there's a lot more work to it than that. He just wanted to be full on retired, and that's the way it went. But as far as wanting to do it, I had people tell me, you've been doing this for a while, you should do write a book or, do something. And, the podcasting aspect, that's what kind of came. It was sort of popular around then. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot, see what happens.
What got you into the dispatching field?
So kind of funny story about that. So before I worked in dispatch, I was a tuxedo and costume salesman. And I'd actually scheduled a trip to go to Scotland. And a week before I was supposed to go, we had somebody quit and they tried to cancel my vacation. So I was thinking, okay, well, this job doesn't pay very much and it's not going to really go anywhere. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go. And once I come back, I'll try to find a job. And my dad, he was sheriff's deputy, which he worked in the jail at the time. And he started looking around the government site and saw 911 dispatcher, thought I had the right mindset for it and everything, and went and applied, and it just kind of took off from there. It worked out.
Now, about 25 years later, here you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I started there when probably around the same age as a lot of the students that you're teaching. Started when I was 20.
I believe Carly has a few questions she wants to ask about dispatching.
So I know that a lot of people, it's really hard for them to stay calm under pressure. How do you manage that?
Well, right now I've been doing it so long, I've heard just about anything you can think of. So it's just kind of repetitive. When I started though, it was a little bit different. I mean, I'm normally a pretty calm person, and it really kind of depends on what you have going. And with this job, it's generally so busy. You're call after call nonstop the entire time. Either that or you're on a police or fire radio. So there's constantly something going on. So to make it kind of simple, to forget your last call, it's pretty easy because there's always a call right after that. And it's kind of like being thrown in the deep end to swim. At first you're a little bit frightened and it's a little bit scary, but then you start swimming and it's okay. It's normal.
So basically, there's just so much going on, you don't have time to react.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense.
I want to make sure that the listeners for our chats here, that you work in a 911 communications center for the metro area. And
Yes.
is that different from a police dispatcher Yeah,
Sort of, yeah. When I actually started, I was hired as a police dispatcher. And back then we had a separate, they were both in the same building, but we had a police dispatch that was downstairs, and upstairs was the fire and EMS dispatch that was run by the fire department. So I was actually hired by the police department. And I think it was about 2.5, 3 years after I started, they actually consolidated the two together so we could have everything really streamlined. Everybody was trained the same way. And that way, if a medical call came in or a police call, anybody could take the call and there's no delays and transfer like that. So, and as far as like the metro area, it's the entire county, Davidson County. So it's, I think somewhere around 590 something square miles. And during the day, over 1 million people. At night, 685,000, something like that. So it's a decently populated area.
be the first person that gets called by a lot of people who are under stress from either a loved one being hurt, them being hurt, seeing something, car accident, whatever. And I'm assuming that you may have to stay on that call sometimes until the people arrive there to provide the assistance, whomever it may be. I don't know if you've ever had an instance where they have passed while you've been on the phone with them or anything like that, but how do dispatchers and you particularly cope with something like that?
Again, for me, it's kind of the repetitive doing it so many times. Yeah, if you're there for any length of time, you will at some point be the last person to talk to another person before they die. I mean, it's everybody likes to think that, with 911, they're going to get a call, help's going to get out to them, and the police or an ambulance, someone's going to save the day. And that's just not always the case. I mean, there are sad stories literally every single day that I go to work. Someone that wakes up in the morning and they're laying next to their, 85-year-old husband or wife. They've been married for 50 plus years, and that person's no longer breathing and they're cold and stiff to the touch. They just pass away overnight. Or, you might be having someone that's, say, in the 30-year-old range, and they've overdosed on drugs. And despite use of Narcan or even doing CPR, they don't come back from it. So that happens. And of course, suicides too. That is actually one of the things that I've talked about in my sessions at CrimeCon and just on my show, that they're, as far as suicides go, generally they kind of lump into two different types of suicidal people. The people who call and they say, I'm feeling suicidal. I'd like to get some help. And, that those people, they generally do. They want to get some help of some sort. They're feeling depressed. They may want some sort of drugs to help calm their mood, something like that. Those people generally don't kill themselves. The people who call in and they say, my name is so-and-so, I'm at this address, I'm going to kill myself, you can find me, and they'll tell you where. And most of the time, there's nothing you can do about that. They've made up their mind, and you're going to be the last person they talk to. And I've had that multiple times. I talked in my session at CrimeCon again, this time, 2 of the instances I've had that way. One was a woman who called and she said exactly that. She gave me her name, her address. She said, I'm going to kill myself. You can find me in the backyard. Tell everyone I'm sorry. And then I heard a gunshot. And the other one that, I talk about that's kind of notable, I guess is a good way to put it. The same type scenario, a guy gives me his address and his name, and he says, you can find me in the pool. And then I hear a splash, and he had tied a bunch of Brico blocks to his feet and threw them in the pool, and so he could drown himself. And once I got there, that's exactly where it was, at the bottom of the deep end. One of the things that I always say to myself is they made up their mind. It wouldn't have mattered who's on the phone with them, what you say to them. They're going to do it, and there's nothing you could do to change that. So it's really out of your hands.
And then there's going to be somebody else called in that needs your help, and you can't dwell on the past. You got to move on and help them and get people moving to where they need to go to help them. We met at CrimeCon out here in Denver. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, do you go to that about every year or?
Yeah, that was my 4th one. I started going to it when it was in Vegas, and then it was in Orlando, then Nashville last year, and then Denver this year.
And I believe next year it's in Vegas again.
Yeah, going back to Vegas again.
Oh, okay. And you'll be out there. You plan to make that trip too, huh?
Yeah, always in the directly after the previous one. I'm always in talks with people about going back, and we're already talking about it. It's usually not confirmed until a few months out, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, good. When I read on your website, Christmas bombing of
Hmm.
2010 or
2020.
I think you
were
were
you
thinking
work?
of the 2010 flood.
Yeah, I was there for that too.
Okay. Were you working on those two particular occasions when that happened? Yeah.
Yeah, to go back to the 2010 flood, I was actually, at the time, I was attending my cousin's wedding in South Carolina, and the news hit, that Nashville got severe flooding. I think it was something like 11 or somewhere between 11 and 13 inches of rain in the course of about a day and a half. And it was just a massive amount of rain. And interstates were flooded, parts of downtown was flooded, neighborhoods completely underwater. It was pretty crazy. So I actually it was supposed to be a week long trip that was going to be gone. I cut that short and came back early and jumped on and helped out wherever I could because there was a lot of things going on. I mean, stuff like that. You get a lot of looting, people calling in. There's still the initial piece of it where people are doing water rescues. And I mean, there were people literally in their attics or up on top of their roofs waiting for people to come by in boats or, whatever to be taken off and taken to safety. So that part had already passed. So my part of it was just trying to help sort of with the cleanup of everything. And then the bombing, I remember Christmas Day generally is a really quiet day. It's probably one of the slowest days of the year because most people, they sleep in a little bit. They have their family get-togethers later on. It's generally most people are happy during that time, and especially for Nashville, as of here recently, we've had such a population growth that most of the people that live here now are not actually from here. So most people go home for the Christmas holiday. So it's, the population is greatly decreased. So I walk in, my shift starts at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm actually working a radio, what we call our county-wide radio. And that one does all the kind of extra units, detectives, traffic units, bomb squad, things like that. And they do any type of outside notifications as well. So when I walk in, normally everybody on Christmas morning at 6:30, they're just kicked back. The phones are not ringing. Nobody's really talking on the radio that much. And when I walk in, everybody's up and walking around, and there's just this kind of like a really kind of a tense, mood, I guess is a good way to put it. And I walk up to the guy that I'm about to take over the radio from. I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Well, since, a little while ago, there's somebody reported there's an RV downtown on Second Avenue, and it's playing this message, repeating the message saying there's a bomb going to go off, and it's got a countdown." And as he's saying this, somebody says something on the radio, and the guy that I'm about to relieve on the radio, he says, "And it just blew up." And I said, "Okay, hop up, I'll jump on and we'll get going." So I was on the phone most of the day with bomb squad, ATF, FBI, just getting everybody en route. And there were people, all the extra units checking en route on their own down there. And it was just, mass explosion. It tore up a couple city blocks and ruined phone communications for several states for a couple of days. So yeah, it was a big mess, and the whole thing never should have really happened. I mean, nothing like that should ever happen.
Hopefully there wasn't too many people downtown. Hopefully that it wasn't a big mass casualty type of situation, was it?
No, it actually at first it was kind of hard to tell. They had time to the very few people that live. It's right downtown, and if you've been to Nashville, most people know where Broadway is. Where this was, it was about 2 blocks north of Broadway on Second Avenue, where the RV was parked at. And almost all the places on Second Avenue, it's a mix of restaurants and bars, things like that. Above those are a lot of places have been made into apartments, condos, and there were some people that were there, plus a few of the homeless people that were in the area who, they sleep in breezeways or on stairs or whatever. They managed to clear almost everybody out from those areas. And luckily the only person that died was the bomber himself. He was inside the RV when it blew up. There were minor injuries past that. Mostly were the police officers. They had some hearing damage and I think some cuts and scrapes, but for the most part, nobody else. I mean, no one else died. So that was amazing.
Good thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I kind of thought of something a little bit ago with how you said you have, like, with your answering the phones and like talking to people who might be dying themselves or with other people who are not in great shape themselves. And then you stay on with them for a while.
It depends
How
on the. Oh, sorry. I thought that. Are you finished? Go ahead.
so it depends on kind of the scenario and whether or not you'd stay on. Okay. I mean, that
Yeah,
would
if
make
if
sense.
it's like actual life threatening, a lot of people think that, if it's a wreck with injuries or something like that, I'd say the vast majority of the phone calls you don't stay on the phone with. Now, if you can help prevent something from happening, if you have someone that is in need of CPR, or someone is about to have a baby or something like that, those type of calls you do. Or if you have, as far as like the crime thing, the one that comes to mind is a residential burglary. If you're at home in the middle of the night, or even during the day, most people work, well, a lot of people work from home now. Most burglaries are done during the middle of the day. So you could be there and working at home in your office, and then someone kicks in your front door, breaks out a window, something like that. And the person's hiding. They're waiting for police to come. A lot of times they may not have a way to defend themselves if it comes to that. So you have to stay on the phone to try to see if they're safe, number one, and also past that, if they can see the suspect. So, whatever this suspect is, what they look like, if when the police pull up or they hear the sirens, if they take off running, we want to know who we need to look for to try to catch them.
See, I don't know how to word it, but I'm kind of what the gist of what I'm getting at is how do you hang up on those people? Like if they are if they're in that scenario where they are injured themselves or if someone they know is injured, like how do you like how would you go about ending that phone call?
Well, if it's again, in kind of a minor injury, say that someone is riding a bike and they have a wreck, they break their leg. If as long as it's not a compound fracture and there's no like bone showing or bleeding or anything like that, there's really not too much you can actually do for that person other than tell them to stay still, don't try to get up or move around or anything to, complicate the injury. And at that point, if you know where they are, their location and everything, there's no need to stay on the phone with them just because there's nothing else you can really do. So it's if there's actual bleeding control, or like I said, CPR, some other minor things like that, or if there's an active situation where a suspect is involved and that suspect can be caught or is not well known. Like if you say it's a domestic dispute or something like that, you know exactly who the suspect is. If they get out and run away, there's no problem catching them. It might take a little while, but we know exactly who they are. But if it's something like the scenario I said with the residential burglary, that person likely doesn't know who the suspect is. So getting the best description and also trying to make sure they stay safe, you have to stay on the phone with them until police get there or the suspect leaves.
So it's not necessarily like you see on 911 Los Angeles, 911 Lone Star, 911 or whatever those are, where they seem like all the 911 dispatchers there get all the good calls where, somebody's in the trunk of a car being kidnapped and they're on the phone with them, or somebody's hiding in the closet with somebody in there. Have you had any calls where you've had someone who was a victim of a kidnapping, or somebody's in their home and they're hiding and they call you and say that somebody's in there? I'm thinking over 25 years, you may have had the occasion to have something like that.
Yeah, many times on the burglary, absolutely that happened. It usually the ones that call in about those where they're hiding, those are almost always in the middle of the night. And I've worked all the different shifts. I was on midnight shift for I believe 3 or 4 years, several years ago, and those are the ones I really hated because, as I said before, these people, a lot of them have no way to defend themselves, or they might be a single woman or someone that's small or even elderly, someone who would have trouble defending themselves, even if they had the means to do so. So when I hear something like that, it's just, okay, they're relying on the police to get out there and hoping they get there before the suspect finds them or does something else. I'll give you a good example. And well, this is one of the things I said before as well, many times, is that a lot of the calls I took last week, I can't remember, but I remember several of the calls I took my first month there 25 years ago. And one of them, kind of like you were saying, this started out more of a prowler. There's a kind of a distinction between what we would consider like a suspicious person, a prowler, and then someone who actually is trying to make entry or does make entry into a structure. At this point, it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, my very first month taking phone calls. I did have a trainer with me, so they were listening in, but this person says, they call them, like I said, it's really early in the morning. They say there's somebody at my door. They've been knocking on my door for the past several minutes, knocking really loudly. And she's like, I don't want to answer the door. And I was like, okay. So if it was someone walking down the street kind of oddly that time of the morning, that's more suspicious person. This is more, they're right by the house. Wasn't really to the letter of the law of prowler, but it's pretty close at this point. Later it gets more. She tries to look out the window to see if she can see who it is. The angle where he's at, she can't really see. But then she goes out or she sees the guy goes back out to his car, and she's telling me, he's at his car now. Now he's in his trunk. He's getting something out of it. It's like a backpack or something. And then a minute or two later, she says, okay, he's walking around my house. He's going around the back. I can't see him at all now. And then she starts kind of screaming, but it was muted. He's setting my house on fire. So what he'd done is gone out and he had a gas can in a backpack, and he went around and doused her entire house with gasoline and then lit it on fire. And, that at that point, I'm kind of caught in an odd space, because you don't keep somebody inside of a burning house, but you also don't send them outside to someone who likely wants to do them harm. So luckily, after he lit the house on fire, he runs and jumps in his car and then peels out of the driveway and then takes off. At that point, I say, get out of the house. And believe it or not, when she got out there, she saw the car driving off. She could actually see it at this point, and she knew exactly who it was. And she said, she gave me the name, and she says, it's somebody that I used to work with. We had a workplace dispute and they got fired because of it. And that was enough for this person to say, okay, I'm going to burn this woman's house down.
Yeah, that's a call to remember. So you remember that from the first being there. When do you think you're going to retire? I don't know. How close are you?
Well, right now, the minimum retirement age is 53 for us. So I can go before then, but the way the pension and everything works, you have a penalty cut from doing that. So to get my full pension, I have to wait until I'm 53. And that's in, 7 years from now for me.
Well, you'll make it. I'm sure you'll make it there. Now, you working mainly days?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So when you get a little seniority, you can kind of maneuver.
Oh, when you get a lot of seniority.
Okay.
I think I went back granted they do split up, but the rank I am, because we have different classifications.
Okay.
With that, the rank that I'm sitting at now, to get on day shift at all would take you somewhere between probably 10 and 12 years. And, as far as now I've got day shift and weekends off, and that only took me, I think it was 22 or 23 years to get the full weekends off. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever met anybody from a call that just wanted to meet you because you gave them good advice, or you, in their mind, you did help them stay safe or anything like that? Has that ever happened?
No, actually, I've not had anybody come up and try to meet me like that. That's actually a really, really rare thing for anybody. Usually something like that is for like a really tough CPR call. And if somebody actually pulls through, or if they deliver a baby, in the CPR call, that's one thing that, kind of like you were saying on TV shows. By the way, the 911 show, I've never seen a single episode of any of that, so I can't really remark too much on that. But as far as CPR goes, most people see it on a TV show or movie. They see someone give mouth to mouth, a few breaths, a couple chest compressions, and then the person just magically sits up and wonder what happened. And that doesn't happen. Successful CPR happens roughly 5% of the times that it started. So it's really rare that you're going to bring somebody back from a cardiac arrest with CPR. And now I've kind of went off on a tangent. What was your original question?
Has anybody ever wanted to, anybody ever met you or anything because of a call you had, or they,
I've had several people call up and, talk to my supervisor, telling how good of a job I did, or how I calmed them down, or whatever like that. It seems like it's more rare for everybody nowadays. I think it's probably because our call volume, as more people moving into town, the call volume just increases, and we have to, we're always having to go as fast as we can. So it's kind of hard to do. And, we give the level of care that's needed to any phone call. It doesn't really matter what kind of call it is, but most of the calls we get, it's not like in the movies. It's someone saying, oh, I was turning into McDonald's and somebody, barely tapped my bumper when I tried to stop. No injuries, no real crime that was committed other than maybe someone following too closely. It's stuff like that, or credit card fraud, or just really, really basic mundane stuff. And that's the vast majority of the calls that we take.
Carly, got another question there, I think.
Yeah, you said that there's different classifications for dispatchers. Do you have like a general description kind of what that looks like?
Yeah. When you start off, and granted, we have our own kind of classification just for our center. You
Mhm.
start off as an emergency telecommunicator one, and that's when you start off as a trainee. That's your base pay when you start out, and that's just you going through training. After you get through your training, which the initial bit of it takes about a year to do, you go through your phone training where you learn how to take phone calls, and then after you get released to do that on your own, a couple months later they put you through the radio, like for doing the police radio dispatch. And after you're done that, and after your first year, you have the chance to move up to the next ranking. Those just kind of keep going up until you get to where you're dispatching for fire as well, which is a different kind of animal in and of itself. But once you get to that level, that's the highest you go without being a supervisor or trainer or something like that.
And I'm assuming that with those come pay increases, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go. So you want to achieve that hopefully as you go along through the system there, if you stay there, right? And you want to do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If anybody gets into it, depending on where you start working at, if they have a similar structure that we do within the first, 2 or 3 years, you have pretty big jumps in pay.
What's the size of your emergency communication center there for the metro area?
We have, I think, somewhere around 180 employees total, but that
Wow.
includes all of our dispatchers, all of our training staff, all the command staff, all the technology people, quality assurance, HR. It's like, it's
Oh,
a
okay.
kind of an all-in-one type thing. So, but as far as dispatchers go, they kind of fluctuate the numbers every year, but I think we're somewhere in the 120 to 130. It might be more than that. I haven't looked at the way they've actually got it structured out. Sometimes they have to move around people due to budget reasons and change their titles and stuff. But yeah, I can't remember how many we're actually budgeted for now, but it's over 120 for dispatchers though, I think.
Has there ever been a time when you've had to use nine your own service there for yourself?
Not for myself. No, luckily I've had to
Okay.
call 911 a few times.
Okay.
By like driving in from work, noticing bad accidents or something like that. And one of the times I remember I was going home from work. I'd been at work I went in early that morning. So, or no, actually, I take that back. I worked over. So I was leaving. It was about, I think, 6 o'clock at night. And I was driving down the interstate and the entire interstate just stopped. And it was just, two or three cars in front of me where the line kind of stopped right there. Nobody was moving at all for traffic. So I was thinking, okay, there's probably a wreck, maybe with injuries. Maybe I can go up and assist a little bit. So I drove on the shoulder past the other cars. And when I got there, there was, I'm trying to like envision this in my mind where it was. There were probably three SUVs completely turned over on their roof. There were two or three other cars that were wrecked, and there was a motorcycle and a motorcyclist laying down on the pavement.
Oh,
And so it was multiple cars that had flipped over, and then the guy on the motorcycle, he was laying down and he had a compound fracture, bone showing. And once I got up there, I started looking at him and I was like, how's your head feel? Are you awake? Are you breathing? And he's like, yeah, my leg really hurts. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Just don't move. And then as I got up looking from him, I start seeing a bunch of bleeding people coming out of the SUVs, and they all start kind of running at me because I have my uniform on. And at the time we had sort of kind of police looking uniforms. So they come up running to me for help. And, there were too many of them all at once. It was probably 6 or 7 people all doing the same thing. And I just had to tell them to just hold off a second. We'll get to you. And finally, after doing all this, it was, probably only 2 or 3 minutes. I'll call up to work and I use one of our private lines for, fire department dispatch. I said, hey, so this wreck out here on I-24, who's coming to it? How many units do you have coming? Because we got multiple people injured. And they said, what wreck on I-24? And there were, I mean, literally hundreds of cars on the interstate, at least I'd say anywhere from 5 to 10 up front, plus all the people that were involved that could have called. I guess maybe I got up there quick enough that they thought, okay, he's taken over. He's probably called. And at that point I hadn't, because I was assessing patients. And yeah, so nobody had called at that point. And yeah, it turned out, like I said, I think there were somewhere around 6 or 7 people hurt. Luckily nobody died. So that was something. But that's stuff like that's happened quite a few times in my time coming up.
Is there any other good stories you have to share?
I mean, I've probably got more than you can fit in. I mean,
Hey, maybe one that sticks out in your mind, a good one.
let me think. As far as like a good one, like a notable one. All right, this is a criminology class. So one of the things that I always, when I'm doing my sessions at CrimeCon, I was actually a trainer at my work for 10 years, and I love doing that. But I think I love doing the job on my own a little bit more. So I stopped doing that. But anyway, so in my CrimeCon sessions, I actually have people come up on stage and try to take 911 calls. We have actors backstage. We write out some scenarios, give them the tools that they can use to try to do this, and they kind of get a very crash course way of doing this. So as far as the story goes, this again is one of my really, really old calls that I took a long time ago. It was a woman who called. This is again on midnight shift. It was in my first month. It was a woman who called, and she had just gotten free. She was tied up. Actually, she was duct taped up by somebody who broke into her apartment, sexually assaulted her at knife point after duct taping her up, and stole her credit cards, and then left after that. She managed to get free from the duct tape, and she called 911, told us about what happened. And my trainer was just saying, okay, get a description. At that point, being that I was new, I was more concerned about the story. I wasn't really thinking too much about finding the suspect, even though that was the main thing at that point. Yes, absolutely getting this person help. But at this point, something bad had happened to her, but at like this moment, she's safe. The guy's gone. So we wanted to get the suspect info so police could try to get him. And so I got that, really stuck to what we were supposed to do in that regard, get a description of what he looked like, about how old he is, height, weight, what color shirt and pants he had on, the male, female, if he, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, anything like that. Just something that we can get on. If we pass him on the way there, we can stop him, try to pick him up, detain him. They get out there to her, and luckily, she's not terribly hurt. So, but they did get her credit card information, called the credit card companies and flagged them. And just minutes later, he was at an ATM trying to use one of the cards, and they rushed over there, immediately found the guy with the credit cards, matched the description exactly, and took him into custody, arrested him. Now, one of the things that happens like afterwards, a lot of that I don't keep up with, especially nowadays. I do my part of the job, and that's one of the things I was going to get to with this. At the time, I was about the same age as this person, because this was a college student. She was, I think, 21, maybe 22. I was 20. And all I can think of was that I want to help this woman. I've just heard this horrific thing that happened to her. And, I feel like I needed to go there or do something, or I didn't really know what. And my trainer says, no, your part of this job is done. You did your bit of this, and that's all you have to do. The police are going out there. The medics are going out. They're all doing what they're supposed to do. Your part of it is over and done with, and you did a good job doing it. So, it's a really horrific story, but at the same time, when you're looking at stuff like this, as far as like criminology goes, finding the suspect, the very first part of it is trying to get something from the victim or an eyewitness to hopefully quickly catch this person. And if not, later on, link everything together.
And I think that's something probably that, dispatchers, some really have to understand, that your job is to get that initial information, get it as quickly as you can, hopefully as accurately as you can, and get it out to the people that does the next step in the, I guess, the process of the job to do their part then. Everybody
Absolutely.
has a part to play in it. Okay. And good advice. We can wrap up, and We appreciate you being on the show today on our podcast for the school and the students that's going to hear this, and maybe other people if we get lucky.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it. Okay. And I'm
Oh
going
yeah,
to
thank you
stop.
for having me on too.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure.
We thank Brandon for being here today and talking about what it is like being a 911 dispatcher.
Criminology Chats is brought to you by the Chicago School. For more information about the institution, please visit www.thechicagoschool.edu. I would like to extend my gratitude to the students who participated in this episode.
We want to hear from our listeners, so please email us at crimpodcast@thechicagoschool.edu. That's CRIMPODCAST at the Chicago CHICAGO school SCHOOL.edu.
This podcast is produced and edited by A.M. Peters with additional post services provided by Audio Photo Synthesis. I'd like to give a special shout out to her because if it wasn't for her, this episode and all episodes would not be possible. So thank you so much, Amy. I'm J.R. Rainbolt, your host, and I eagerly anticipate you listening to our next episode. Be safe out there.
The views and perspectives shared in these recordings are intended solely for informational purposes and do not reflect the official stance or policies of the speakers or the Chicago School. Any commercial products and manufacturers mentioned are included for informational reasons only and do not imply endorsement or approval by the speakers or the Chicago School.